It's one thing to have this knowledge. Now I think the challenge is how to implement
Yes.
it and carry it out. And I think of all those, if I had to choose, probably the most important one that could use a lot of support, at least on my end, is the communication. Because I feel like, I've always had a very open communication with my son, who's 13 and a half years old. And we're at a stage where he wants to be independent, but then he also sometimes, wants to be babied, and he's back and forth with that. But I just feel like we speak such different languages. We're at that stage, like we don't really understand. We're both in family therapy here
That's
at
great.
St. Luke's.
Well, that's great. That's a great step to take, because if you do really feel like it's at that extreme of speaking different languages, you're getting a translator. That's going to help you both understand each other, because I'm guessing you're both wanting the other to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a different language in some ways, because your son, he knows the language that he used to speak with you, but he's now learning another language as well in becoming a man. He's on this new road to becoming a man. And as far as I can tell, you're not a man. Okay, so there's something right there that he's not going to know how to get from you. He probably can get a tremendous amount from you, but he doesn't know that yet. And so he's not going to know what kind of questions to ask you, whether or not your answers are going to make sense to him and what his experience is. And for the most part, yes, you can. You will be able to help him, and he will be able to learn a lot from you. But he just may need some assistance in figuring out how to take what you say and make it fit what he's going through. It doesn't look the same anymore,
Okay, my son is the one who seems to feel he knows everything. I know that's on the
Shocking.
adult side of the thing, but that's where you can't tell him anything. He knows it. So,
How old is he?
well, he is 12.
Oh, wow. You got a long road ahead of you.
Wow.
Our cards are in the back. No. Wow, 12. Okay. He's a bright kid, it seems.
But he believes he does. Like you can't tell him anything. He knows it all, and it's very frustrating.
So where does this put you? What happens to you when he knows everything? Thinking back to these adult dimensions.
Oh, it makes me crazy.
Okay, so let's take the
because I
first
want to
one
do
in terms
the-
of your relationship. You said your husband
I'm
says
the
you're
rigid.
the rigid one.
Yeah, I'm the rigid one.
So how much of this has to do with the fact that your son knows everything?
Well, it bothers my husband, the pushover, as well.
Uh-huh.
Because he doesn't, it's the same reaction to, but I want him to hear what I'm saying, and I don't feel like he's hearing what I'm saying, listening, and sometimes he'll just stop, like 4 words in and be like, I know this, but he doesn't know it, and he doesn't know it. But
Let me ask you, does he know, or does he think that you're the rigid one and your husband's the pushover?
yes,
He knows that?
Yes.
Okay. So first job, the two of you get on the same page. So the two of you do a little bit of the work before we're going to get your son to realize he doesn't know everything. Because I think he does know everything. He knows how to push your buttons,
Yeah.
and he knows how to push your husband's buttons.
Okay.
That's all he really needs. He's got kind of everything wrapped up there. So we got to get the two of you in a room a couple times and figure out how are you going to learn to be a little bit more of that lenient person that your husband is, and how is he going to hold on to some more of the structure that you hold on to, that you're able to manage. And once you guys can get on the same page and you're both communicating to your son the same thing, and he's trying to push your button and it's not working, your husband's giving him the strict reaction, and he's trying to push your husband's button, and you're the one coming in to say, go ahead, I'm okay with you doing this or that or whatever, you're going to turn his world upside down, and he's not going to know everything anymore. But what
So
he
we
is
get
going to
to mess
get,
with his head.
yes,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
great.
What he is going to get, though, is much more of a feeling of safety and security, because he shouldn't know everything at 12. That's a pretty scary place to be. And
Yeah,
once,
I find it terrifying.
yeah. And so does he, but he may not admit that to you.
But doesn't that require her husband agreeing that it's important to go there?
Yes.
If he thinks he likes the way he's dealing with his son and wants to hold on to that?
Does he?
I think he wants to be his best friend forever and ever and ever and ever. And, you know, this has been going on. I mean, you know, I'm more interested in rules and,
Well, you have to be, though, because
know.
if that's where he is, then you're going to have to hold the other side of it.
but my son knows, like when he wants to do something, you know, he calls my husband, not me.
Yeah,
you know, and-
yeah. And if you can even convince your husband to come with you, either to, you know, speak with friends about this, or find a therapist, a counselor, to kind of give a couple of sessions of advice on what might happen if this continues in this way, you might get him to shift a little bit.
Does your husband know everything?
No.
Does he think?
I mean,
he
does he
does?
think
Does he think he does? No, but he has a very firm idea of the relationship he wants with our son, and which I don't think is all that practical for this point.
So going back to what this woman on this side of the room said earlier, your husband was a teen as well at some point, I assume, and he had his experience as a teenager that's now made him the person that he is. And for whatever reason, it's important for him to be this lenient pushover with your son. So something there is stuck. And maybe somebody can help him unstick it a little bit so that he can see a couple of more options and maybe move a little bit to the left.
And is that the kind of thing, I mean, that you guys do? I mean, is that,
Yep.
and then just to, since I'm here, I'm gonna ask the one other, which
Okay.
is, what do you do about the drug question?
What do you mean?
Well, you
You're
know,
asking, have you experimented?
Yeah, have you done this, and what, if you did it, why can't I do it? And do you just lie, or do you, you know, I'm all for
Well, if a client is asking me, I may not give that answer. But you mean if your
Go
kid is
become a
asking
therapist and say, I'm sorry, I don't
I'm-
disclose that information. You can't do that.
You know, I think you're wondering, like, when your kid asks you, yo, Mom, have you ever used weed? Is that
Right.
Okay.
Or do I say to him, like, you know, don't do it because it's bad for you, and, you know, I mean,
So take a step back from both of those. If he asks you, Mom, did you ever do drugs? What do you think he's really asking you?
I think he's probably asking for permission to do it himself.
Probably, but I think he's also asking you, do you know what it's like to do drugs? Do you know what happens to somebody when they do drugs?
Or do you know what it's like to be a kid who doesn't know if he should or shouldn't? And how did you come to that decision? I mean, I think the bottom line with a lot of this is, if he asks you that question, why are you asking me that question? What's going on? Like, are you thinking about doing it? And knowing that a lot of kids experiment, but not a lot of kids become dependent. And sort of having an honest conversation with, you're probably going to be presented with this. What do you feel comfortable saying or handling that situation? Are you curious about it? Do you want to try it? Has anyone asked you about it? And sort of just having an open, non-judgmental conversation. I think you're going to get a lot more information from your son than you absolutely cannot do it. Holding that really rigid is not going to work. And your husband holding that, do whatever you want, whatever, it's cool, we'll smoke in the back. You know, like, that's not going to happen. We'll have to call ACS. But so, you know, those are the two extremes, and sort of just having an open, honest discussion is going to be really important to elicit information from your son, and he'll trust you more to give you more of that information.
What's a legitimate time by which a kid should be home at the 17, 18-year-old, you know, on a school night and then on a non-school night? It doesn't matter what they're doing, because you never really know.
Right. Well, we did just have this conversation last night, because I asked Shilpa, what's a reasonable, and what was your curfew?
What did I say?
So Shilpa had no curfew because she was a model student.
No, that's not why.
No, I'm just kidding.
I just knew how to pull the wool over my parents' eyes really well.
What do you think is a reasonable time? What do people in the audience think is a reasonable time for a 17-year-old?
18-year-old?
19-year-old. Yeah. 11.
Okay,
What-
school night or weekend? Weekend 11. What about a school night?
8, 10.
8?
Okay.
I see nodding back there. 10 for a weekday?
Okay.
Midnight on the weekends.
Does that mean your homework is done and then you can go out?
Oh, well, now we're complicating it. Homework needs to be done.
I do homework first and then everything else comes later.
Okay. So you set the expectation
Oh, yeah.
that your homework is going to be done. Once your homework is done, you have plans, you want to go out, you can come home, you can go out, but I need you to be home by 10. I need to know you're home safe.
And
Okay.
for